Hello guys, another Saturday video from my car, and today I want to share my experience from reviewing the code. Part of my job is constant researching of existing code repositories, open source, sometimes closed source, and then gathering ideas for videos. And by looking at the code, I almost immediately can feel now whether it was written by a junior developer or senior developer. Of course, the line is not that strict and there are gray areas, but in general, you can feel whether the code was written like for the now to launch this feature and that's it, and not even thinking about what could go different with that feature in the future. And then more senior developers usually think about edge cases, think about how to refactor code to potentially make changes in the future, think about testing different cases and stuff like that. So I've been always thinking, and in my mind I was dividing two groups. Junior developers think for now, for short term. They don't think that much about what could happen in a year. They think about how to deliver the feature today, this week or something. And senior developers tend to think long term, what will happen in a year, maybe when the code is maintained by other developers or themselves in the future who wouldn't even remember the decisions of today, and basically thinking long term. But then recently I thought of the third level of developers when I start noticing the overengineering. I kind of hate overengineering parts of the code when I see some pattern, some design pattern adopted, used without really too much value that it would bring. A classical example from me is using repository pattern without really changing that repository class to something else to replace. For example, classical example is database repository for some eloquent model, but without real example or real usage, whether that class would be exchanged with some other class replacing that repository. So why use that pattern in the first place then? So that coding of just in case something happens in the future often leads to overengineering, and then it turns back. When new developers read that code, it's pretty hard to understand, and readability of the code and general understanding of the code is the part of the maintenance in the long run. So then I thought that senior developers are kind of divided into two groups, or maybe even the same developer can be working in two modes. One mode is thinking only long term and trying to adopt any pattern that they learned over their career, no matter the current context. And other developers, perhaps more senior, are constantly asking for the context. What pattern to use in this exact scenario, in this exact project, with this exact situation. And that often may lead to short-term decisions because they do need to launch something this week, something today, quickly fix the bug in production, something like that. But then knowing that there will be a technical debt probably, or implement some pattern only partially, predicting the upcoming changes and knowing what level to abstract the code. So in general, my thinking was summarized in a tweet that I've posted recently, that junior developers think long-term, mid-level developers or mid-senior think long-term, and real senior pro developers can think short-term or long-term, and jumping between both of those thinking depending on the situation, depending on the project, and depending on the context. So general advice to you is think not only about your knowledge how to write code, but what part of that knowledge and which version should be applied for this exact project in your exact situation. I hope that random advice will be helpful for you, and see you guys in other videos.